Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hello. Welcome to your Cycles of Time weekly forecast for the week of October 28th to November 3rd, 2024. This episode is called The Roots of Your Fears, Samhain, a Scorpio new moon, and the season of forgiveness. First off, I wanted to say thank you to all the new followers. I've gotten an influx of new subscribers lately on Substack mostly and across the podcast platforms. So I wanted to say thank you for following and welcome here to Cycles of Time. Thanks so much for coming along on this journey through the cycles of time, the wheel of the year with me. I'm so happy to have you here, especially as we deepen into the darker and more introspective months of juicy and intimate discussion. I got a message from a new follower a couple days ago that said, "It seems you are a broad esoteric reader, an occult Borg, assimilating all information into your own Akashic records." And I thought that was funny, so I wanted to say thank you, Caleb. I really appreciated that framing. Occult Borg here at your service. I guess bringing in a variety of stories and myths to synthesize and learn from is one way of staying ahead of the AI bot curve. So here we go. Speaking of which, this week is jam-packed across the wheel of the year. We're celebrating Halloween, aka Samhain, aka the Witch's New Year on Thursday. Cultures from around the world have celebrations of ancestors this time of year, from Dia de los Muertos and All Saints Day and All Souls Day, which are celebrated on November 1st and 2nd. And then we also have this week the intensity-filled Scorpio new moon on Friday, November 1st, which is helping us set intentions for the type of rebirth and transformation we'd like to manifest in our worlds. On Sunday, an opposition that's been building between Pluto and Mars becomes exact in the last degrees of Capricorn and Cancer. And I don't always talk about astrology beyond the sun's transits, but this one feels really poignant because Pluto and Mars are both the rulers of Scorpio, as I've mentioned before. They're the traditional ancient ruler Mars and the modern ruler Pluto of the sign of Scorpio, and they are coming to a face-off, and they will stay locked in an oppositional face-off across the skies and for a full 6 months. They're meeting up for this first time in Capricorn and Cancer, and then Mars will move into Leo, and Pluto will move into Aquarius, and they'll face off in those two signs. So there's going to be a long Mars retrograde that's about to begin. So this transit will be longer than it normally would. And, Pluto and Mars are known as the malefics in astrology and traditionally. And so I would say this transit is the beginning of a very long birth canal, of kind of a rebirth as we bring the Pluto and Aquarius era into the world, which some are referring to as the fabled age of Aquarius. And, wherever Pluto is in the sky, stays there for a long time. This will be 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius. And so, who knows? It could be kind of ringing in the age of Aquarius, whatever that means to you. But all we know is this opposition, oppositions generally bring up some intensity, some, mirroring reflections from opposite sides of ourselves and our psyches. And so, as we know, like in birth, the only way out is through. So, it's definitely adds some intensity to this week. We've got a lot going on. So let me know in the comments how you all are feeling out there. I definitely don't know anybody who's having a super easy time of it right now. There's been a lot. And with this US election coming up, there's just a palpable tension in the air. So I went last week and voted, and felt really good about it for whatever reason, for whatever it's worth. I got to take my daughter, who's 5, and there was a kids voting booth that she got to cast her vote for her favorite ice cream and her favorite day of the week and her favorite search engine. And they're going to publish the results in the newspaper. So it was cool to go down there with her. And we wore our all black and leather jackets, me and my kid, just on a whim. And it felt, I don't know, it was just kind of like, okay, this means something right now. But I digress. Anyway, back to Pluto and Mars for just a second. As we deepen into the season of the Scorpion and the Witch, their positions in the sky, Pluto and Mars, are definitely reinforcing those themes of death and rebirth, tension, war, and secrets being revealed. Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn is the grand finale of a long story of unveiling the underworld when it comes to structures in government, in corporations, and in celebrity culture. And then Mars at 29 degrees of Cancer, which is the sign of his fall. So Mars isn't exactly comfortable there. It's kind of the final chapter of the story of the planet of fiery action being trapped underwater or kind of kept under house arrest. So as Mars transits into Leo and then back again into Cancer over the coming months, making this opposition to Pluto, we might feel kind of premonitions of a coming out party, kind of like a hot-headed lion leaping out of his den after a long slumber. So it's important to kind of practice our grounding practices, whatever they are, breath work, self-massage, walks in nature, just keeping in mind that there's beyond the immediacy of the news cycle, the larger cycles of time and cycles of the planets have a lot of intensity currently. So just make sure to tap into your resources this upcoming couple of weeks. So the season of Scorpio, as we probably have all discussed, is all about transformation, transmutation, and the kind of death of the egoic selves that we're clinging to out of comfort. It's time to be reborn as individuals and as a society, and I think we can all feel that right now. It's definitely a time right now in history and in the cycle of the year when many of us are truly starting to take off the blinders and beginning to weave in all of the new information that's been revealed from the underworld and will continue to be revealed over the coming weeks. So just remember, you're brave, you're smart, you're strong, you're kind, and you can do this. In the Human Design and I Ching Wheel of the Year, the Sun is transiting through gates 28, the game player, and gate 44, the gate of alertness this week. And these are gates and hexagrams that continue our theme of descent, of merging with the other, and accepting the totality of existence, both the dark and light. So without further ado, here's your forecast for the week. It's definitely a powerful week ahead. I'll be sharing more content on my Instagram at Astrosomatics and Cycles of Time podcast, so be sure to follow me there too. So this week's highlights, we have Thursday, October 31st, Eve until Friday, November 1st is Samhain. It's spelled Samhain for those of you who are not aware, but pronounced Samhain or Samhain. It is an ancient Irish kind of Celtic word, and so meaning the end of summer. So it is pronounced something like Samhain or Samhain. But I used to say Samhain. So if you say that, no shame. We're not always taught Celtic in school. So anyway, Samhain is the cross-quarter holy day between the fall equinox, which was known as Mabon, and the winter solstice, known as Yule, in the pagan wheel of the year. And this is the pagan origins of Halloween. On Friday, November 1st, we have a Scorpio new moon. And on Friday and Saturday, November 1st and 2nd, it is Dia de los Muertos and the Christian celebrations of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. Then Sunday, November 3rd, Pluto in Capricorn is opposite Mars in Cancer. And the Human Design I Ching wheel, Monday through Wednesday, we're in gate 28, the gate of the game player, which we talked about last week. And Thursday through Sunday, we'll be in gate 44, which is the gate of alertness. So the themes of this week that I've kind of downloaded are: our masks and costumes allow us to connect with the wisdom and truth that ourselves are made up of deeply rooted otherness. It's a mycelial web type of theme where we are not just the fruiting body of the self, but we are made up of all of the different tangles down below. Another theme is staying alert to tricksters and in the trick-or-treat scheme of things, and mistakes from your past, and you'll be treated with a beautiful future. And third theme is the power of synarchy, which is joint sovereignty, that places you as a member of a larger team instead of in a silo of your own making. Its place in the Wheel of the Year is the medicine wheel direction west. We're headed towards the north as winter approaches. The pagan season of Samhain, the zodiac season of Scorpio, the moon phase, new moon in Scorpio, and then gate 28, the gate of the game player, which is known as Test of Fate or Lake Over Wind in the I Ching. And that's Monday through Wednesday. And then Wednesday through Sunday, Heaven Over Wind, which means is referenced as coming together, coupling, or birthing in the I Ching, or the gate of alertness. So we start the week continuing to play the game in gate 28, and we did talk about this a bit last week. Happy birthday to anyone whose birthday is in gate 28. And before that, gate 50, which we started last week off with, kind of encouraged us to put all of our ingredients, like our disparate values and our senses of self, into a cauldron so that it could all melt together. That's what gate 50 was kind of all about. And then over last weekend and into the beginning of this week, gate 28 is inviting us to embrace the alchemical transmutation, the newly merged reality, the bubbling brew, if you will. And I've probably said that far too much over the past couple of weeks, but bubbling brew. It's just embracing that alchemical transformation that's happening within the cauldron, and to decide not to recoil from fear of this unknown stew, and instead decide to take a sip, maybe. We're in the time of drinking from life's cup, playing the game, and that's even when we're not sure who will win and what the new rules may be when we come out the other side, when the soup cools down a little bit. So throughout Libra and Scorpio season, we've been deep in the world of the splenic gates of the human design body graph. And these are all gates that kind of expose us to our fears. The spleen is a primal processing center of fear. And last week's gate 50 and gate 28 and this week's upcoming gate 44, the gate of alertness, are all deep fear-based gates. Just being real. These past few weeks have presented us with energies and underworldly journeys that we must face and allow ourselves to be transformed by before we can reach next week's gate 1, the first hexagram of the I Ching, which is the gate of creation or the creator. And gate 1 is an energy that lives in our heart center and connects to our throat center. So we'll be moving away from this long haul through splenic energy and into the heart. And so, of course, we have to go through a test of fate and kind of these challenges and underworldly journeys before we can come back into the sense of the initial creation, right? The creative power of our hearts. So surrounding the fall equinox, the portal between worlds is open and the veil becomes thin. We're shifting from personal focused months of life where growth and self-awareness are key to transpersonal focused months of death, decay, and the awareness of our roots, our mortality, and our interconnection with the past and future in the form of ancestral cellular memories. So things get a lot more complex at this time of year, when we realize that our so-called selves are not so independent and contained as we might have once thought during the spring and summer. We're like, I am me. It's a season of Aries and Leo and Virgo and Cancer, and all of this is self-awareness. But now as we move into, from Libra all the way around the wheel through Pisces, we are really coming to terms. Every year we come to terms in a subtle way of how these selves are not so independent or self-contained after all, but they're instead amalgamations of subconscious, subterranean, and ancestral memories and inner knowings. That immortality that was Gate 50, the city and the gene keys of 50, was about immortality through the continuity of where we come from as biological beings. We are not created in a vacuum, right? So yeah, it's a lot to get this deep, and it just happens kind of fast. It feels like Scorpio season is like, I feel that veil thinning. I heard an owl hoot from my tree next to my hot tub last night when I was sitting in there, and it was a spooky sound amidst the wind blowing through the pine needles. And I'm realizing now that it's the hoo is appropriately spooky because it's asking us the question that we don't know the answer to. I think of owls and Halloween and like the hooting in the night and the hoo. It's kind of asking like, who are you? And when the veil is thin, I think we're tasked to answer that question. Like, who are you really? And celebrations of Halloween, Samhain, and Dia de los Muertos this week are also kind of asking that same question, which allow us, these celebrations and these rituals allow us to convene with the multitudinous and complex versions of ourselves through costume and masquerade and ritual and offerings to the dead and other means of peering through that veil that separates our distinct sense of self from the larger web of existence that truly makes us who we are. I watched a movie the other night that for the first time in a long time, I really never watch full movies because I'm just tired as a middle-aged person, I guess, with a kid. But I made it to the end of this movie, and it's called The Hitman. It's a Richard Linklater film that came out last year, and it's about a guy named Gary Johnson who, based on a true story, is this guy who went undercover with different costumes and personas and masks and personalities, and he pretended to be a hitman for the New Orleans Police Department in the movie. They were doing sting operations where he would help arrest people who would have rented murderers for hire. And so the main character, Gary, who's based off a real person, was also a college professor of philosophy and psychology. And throughout the film, the question, do you know who you are? What is the self? Was asked frequently kind of in his classes. It was a lot of philosophy talking about like, what does it mean to have a self? Like, what is a personality? Is it distinct? Is it concrete? And Gary Johnson, this guy, acted as a fake hitman for 30 years in real life. And within the movie, it showed his merging of his own kind of distinct personality with the characters that he ended up playing. And he became more and more like the character he wanted to be like the more he played him. In the end, the moral of the story was be who you want to be and be it with passion. So it's interesting because he's kind of a square guy in the beginning. He's like tinkering with electronics, and that's how he gets the gig at the police department, was doing wiretapping technology. And there's a scene where he meets up with his ex-wife, who's now pregnant with another guy, and she kind of refers to his past of how he just didn't have any passion, and he was kind of such an intellectually, all in his head kind of guy that he had very little emotional passion that came through, but he loved to talk about, and study about the self and what it means to be human. And so throughout the course of the kind of getting this wiretapping job that then led to him playing this fake hitman because of a turn of events where they just needed somebody to step in for this sting operation, he began to kind of absorb these other personalities and really go all out as far as like creating different costumes. And it reminded me a lot of Halloween and of the kind of masquerades that we put on this time of year. And so in the end of the film, he tells his college class, he says, "I used to believe that reality was objective, immutable, and we're just sort of stuck in a Plato, Descartes, Kant sort of way. But over the years, I've come to believe that the truth is created through the integration of different points of view, and there are no absolutes, whether moral or epistemological." He says, "Now, I find this to be a much more empowering way to go through life. This notion that if the universe is not fixed, then neither are you. And you really can become a different and hopefully better person. Now, the one thing I know for certain is your reality will change over time in ways you cannot even imagine. And I urge you to be open for this transformation. If I have one piece of advice for you moving forward in this complicated world, it is this. Seize the identity you want for yourself. And whoever you want to be after this class, be them with passion and abandon." So the actor who played him says, the whole point of this movie is that it's not too late to seize the identity that you want for yourself and chase what makes you happiest. And if you feel like you're stuck in life, you feel like you're stuck in an identity that's not making you happy, then make the choice to change. So this quote struck me as I watched this movie in the lead up to Halloween, as I've been making a kind of mushroom witch costume and hearing about other people's ideas for transforming their identities with costume over the upcoming week. And I'm a huge fan of costuming for this reason, just to be able to kind of shift, make your body into something that you are not and see how that kind of changes how you act, what your personality is. It's pretty fun. One time I dressed up like Medusa when I was in college and got kind of like weirdly fierce. It was kind of unexpected. I remember it distinctly because I was like, whoa, this is, something's happening here. But I think my favorite group costume that I've heard of this year is a group of orca whales and yacht boys kind of traveling around together, and the madness that might ensue between them with all the orca uprisings that have been going on lately. I just love it, the creativity during Halloween time. So anyway, earlier in the film, like I mentioned, Gary Johnson is portrayed as someone without much passion. He's kind of a nerdy loner guy who studied life more often than he lived it. And so when he's thrown into the interpersonal side of the work at the police department, he kind of has the chance to discover his own humanity and change himself in doing so. And I go into this today because it really resonates with me with the gate of the game player, as well as the gate of alertness, the next week that's coming up, the 2 gates of this week in the human design wheel. So the gate of the game player, it kind of reminded me of, because it's kind of like, the game player is about choosing to play the game and being all in. And it's like, if we stay in our silos and in our isolation and our pre-existing ideas of who we are, and we don't allow others in to shape and change us, we're not really playing the game at all. We're just watching it. We're on the sidelines. And the gate of the game player shows us the power in allowing mergers and dissolving our sense of boundaries. And so that's something that it is the fully melted, bubbling cauldron where there was all those pieces of, Aries through Libra season of like selfhood and like distinct identity are melted down just in one fell swoop. But the 64 gates of the I Ching never let you sit with a certain energy for long, which is why I love the I Ching and the Human Design and Gene Keys wheels, because it's 5 days and it really shows how everything is constantly in motion. I think sometimes we can say, oh, it's Scorpio season or it's whatever zodiac season, and that lasts a whole month. So it can kind of be like so much can happen within a month. So much of a story arc can happen within a month. And so I love adding in these interpretations of the I Ching's gates and just the beautiful ancient story arc that happens through the course of the year with the Fuxi cycle of the I Ching, which is what is used in the Human Design Rave Mandala. So anyway, like you don't really sit with that merging and melting for too long, or else you might just get boiled up, right? So the next gate later this week, the gate of alertness, will show us that more complex than just letting in the totality of everything to subsume our sense of identity for too long. The gate of alertness shows us that we have the power to choose who we want to be within that, rising out of the cauldron anew, kind of like the phoenix rises out of the ashes. And we will always contain parts of our old self and many pieces of our old self, and as well as parts of our ancestors and our pasts. But this second part of this week brings the energy of like we can also choose to learn from their mistakes and through that create a new reality for our futures. So the sun will be transiting through the gate of alertness during Halloween and Samhain and the new moon on Friday, and the Pluto-Mars opposition. The sun will be there in this place of choosing who we want to be while recognizing that we are made up of multitudes and parts that are beyond ourselves, not just our ancestors, but like the more than human world that exists around us that we are constantly being affected by, and the organisms and the germs and all of the stuff that we don't really necessarily give too much credit to. It's like, this is about like saying, oh yeah, I am all of that, and I still within that have choice. So in order to figure that out, though, we have to stay alert to what the tricks are within this treat of life. Like what are others up to? What are all of these different beings that we are intermingling with? Like what's their deal? So we need to stay alert as we come to meet others in our journeys along these upcoming holidays, whether that's a new friend in this world or a ghost, goblin, or fairy from the other side of the veil. And when the veil is thin and when we're vulnerably dropping our leaves and composting into the soil, kind of leaving our branches bare for the world to see, we can and must still trust our embodied instinct about what is friend and what is monster. So moving on to Samhain, Halloween, All Souls, and Day of the Dead. A little bit of history on Samhain. It's a cross-quarter day, like I mentioned, that is between the autumn equinox, Mabon, and the winter solstice, Yule. So it's right in the middle of those. And Samhain, the word comes from a Celtic word meaning end of summer. So in the Celtic wheel of the year, there were only 2 seasons, true distinct seasons, summer and winter, and Samhain was the third of 3 harvest festivals, representing the end of the light time of the year and the beginning of the dark time. The first 2 harvest festivals we have talked about already in this podcast, because they were the past 2 pagan holy days. We had Mabon on the fall equinox, and then before that, Lammas in late summer during Leo season, and now Samhain. So it was said in ancient Ireland that any food left on the fields after Samhain was going to be a tribute for the fairies, and anyone who harvested after this holy day would be cursed by the dark fairies, who rule the winter season and were known to be tricksters. Some myths say that the fairies during this time of year are moving their homes, but they're moving. So therefore they're more likely to be encountered around this time than other times of year. Samhain is a fire festival, just like its opposite holiday that happens in May, 6 months ago, 6 months from now. And the pagan holiday that happens in May is known as Beltane or May Day. And on that day, on that fire festival, livestock were released from their paddocks out to pasture, and a giant community bonfire was lit to welcome the coming sun and the rising summer months. So likewise at Samhain, right now, a community bonfire is lit. Often, these fires are often lit by the friction caused by a giant wheel rolling down a hill, and that wheel represents the sun. So the sun and fire worship. And people would take the piece of the community fire back to their individual homes to light their hearth for the cold winter months ahead at Samhain. And these bonfires were also meant to guide souls to the afterlife. On this day, Celts were also known to wear costumes to confuse spirits and carve turnips to ward off spirits as well. And these are traditions that were brought to America by Irish immigrants and then evolved into the Halloween that we celebrate today. Similar to other holidays celebrated at this time of year, like Dia de los Muertos, the Celts believed that the veil between the world of the living and the other world of the dead was thin at this time of year, which allowed spirits to visit the living. Halloween's horror and fright may be a bit more embellished or just modern, secular than its pagan origins, but there's definitely a similar vibe between Samhain and Halloween. It's a time to pay reverence to ancestors, and guide them to where they need to go, the souls that are out there that haven't found their place. But it's also a time of cautionary tales, and the spirits and monsters of the other world in the Celtic world were not always the friendliest, and you definitely had to keep your wits about you, similar to, walking across a cemetery on Halloween. It's all very parallel, although there are definitely differences, of course, as with any holiday that has been secularized or influenced by capitalism or Christianity after, these pagan origins. But very similar vibes, especially Halloween and Samhain maintain the closest distinct connection, I would say, out of many of these holy days. So, in Irish folktale, there's lots of fairies and fae folk, and fairies were known to reside in the other world, along with goblins and other monsters, and they were said to come through at this time of year. There's a little quote from an article on Irish American witchcraft by Morgan Daimler that states, "Because of this increased activity, there are also many folk traditions around avoiding likely active spots or protecting against chance encounters. For example, it was generally advised not to walk on the west side of a building or near water after dark, nor to travel alone at night, as these were seen as putting a person at higher risk of negative encounters. People were also advised to carry iron, such as a nail, in their pocket when they were traveling, as this served to ward against fairies and their interference. If you feel you are being misled or falling under fairy enchantment that needs to be broken, turning an article of clothes inside out is the usual remedy. It's also traditional to leave out offerings as a means to appease anything that may be wandering by. Milk or cream are traditional for this, as is bread. There is no particular ceremony for offering it, and I would suggest that a more casual approach is a good idea. Just be sure to give the best you can, as the fairies hate an offering made with stinginess." Samhain is an important holiday and an important time for many people, pagan and non-pagan. The traditions around this time of year run deep into the past and are finding new life today. Often the focus we find in these revived traditions rests on connecting to the human dead, but it's important to remember that the other world being more active in our world is about more than just that. This is also a time when the beings of the other world are more present in the human world, not as the twee fairies of modern pop culture, but as the powerful and tricky beings of older folklore and myth. This isn't a bad thing, any more than the colder weather of winter or the bare harvested fields are bad things, but it does require a certain canniness to navigate. So, that word canniness is kind of like the word alertness. So kind of cool that the gate of alertness is when this traditional holiday of Samhain falls, because there's a lot of similarities about just, stay alert and you won't get hurt kind of situation. Samhain was celebrated by Celts as well as other pagan groups in the British Isles. And when Christianity arrived there, the holy day was converted to All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day over time. All Saints' Day is celebrated on November 1st, which is a day of honoring saints and martyrs who don't have their own feast days. And in some churches, people write the names of loved ones in a book of remembrance to be prayed for on All Saints' Day. Then All Souls' Day is celebrated on November 2nd, and it's a day of prayer and remembrance for those who have passed away, including friends, relatives, and strangers. People may pray, visit cemeteries, and give alms to commemorate the departed. So Dia de los Muertos celebrates these two holidays as part of the festival in Mexico. So it spans those 2 days of Dia de Muertos. And then, there's several other holidays that celebrate the veil being thin and the connection between the living and the dead around this time. In Korea, their largest national holiday, known as Chuseok, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, but correct me if I'm not. It's celebrated around harvest time in September or October, depending on their lunar calendar. And it's also a time for Koreans to honor their ancestors. In Cambodia, there's a 15-day festival of Pachum Ben, which acknowledges the line between the living and the dead as is at its thinnest at that time, and spirits come back in search of living relatives, hoping to atone for their past life. And in China, Nepal, and Japan, the harvest festivals where ancestors are celebrated and revered happen a little earlier in July or August, but it's a very similar type of celebration where the harvest and the death of the living plant life coincides with respecting and commemorating our ancestors. So I'd say, the tradition of remembering the dead around this time of year, the halfway point between the fall equinox and winter solstice, has many different cultural understandings, but can likely all, or if not all, be traced back to our universally human relationship with the natural world. And, this is a time when, in the Northern Hemisphere at least, the plants are dying and the visual of death and the feeling of death is just beginning to surround us, reminding us deeply of our own mortality and the past that may haunt us as well. Samhain and Halloween in Gate 44 is where we come to meet the roots of our fears and hauntings. And I would say some advice for this week that I'm giving to myself, and you can take it if it resonates with you, but it's to forgive the roots of the fears rather than blaming them. And forgiveness is a big piece of confronting our pasts and confronting our ancestries and confronting the things that we fear, the things that are kind of hidden from full view. So, I think it's a fascinating similarity that appears during this time in the Human Design Wheel of the Year. After transitioning through Gate 28, the Gate of the Game Player, and the Sun travels into Gate of Alertness, Gate 44, just in time for Halloween and Samhain. It's really a beautiful synchronicity, as I just mentioned, because it's that canniness and alertness that has risen to the top. But deeper than that, in the I Ching, Gate 44, the Gate of Alertness, is known as Heaven over Wind, and it's also known as Coming to Meet. And the hexagram depicts the meeting of two forces, heaven and wind, and emphasizes mutual respect and understanding, cautioning against dominance, and promoting balance. With all of these holidays this week focusing on this being a time of year when it's most possible to come to meet our ancestors, I think coming to meet, this I Ching title of this gate, feels quite fitting. The human design title is Alertness, and of course also feels appropriate as it's a time to keep our wits about us. Amidst the very open, the melted cauldron, the bubbling brew, the merger of life and death, it's kind of like, okay, now it's time to just stay alert. So although we're meeting our ancestors and our past and our roots and our fears this week, and it's a beautiful thing, we also must take care not to get swept up in them or to feel like we're destined to repeat the mistakes of those who have come before us. Because the veil is so thin, as we witness summer turn to winter, we must stay alert and utilize the cellular memory of our bodies, our deep instincts that are based on successes and failures from the past, and to be alert to the world around us as it changes shape and form. Transformational Scorpio season. The word transformation, I think, is almost overused when it comes to Scorpio. I like transmutation because it is really a shape-shifting, like evolutionary process instead of like a instant Transformers kind of situation. But it's real because it is the world around us is changing shape in a big way. I just harvested with my partner a bunch of mini pumpkins that kind of grew under a tree in my backyard. They were like a rogue pumpkin seed that got scattered out there and then turned into a beautiful vine and created 7 delightful, teeny little oblong pumpkins. And after harvesting those, though, I was noticing the leaves were starting to decompose and everything around was starting to just really change shape from the flowers and life growth to, just subtle breakdown, the subtle reallocation of resources towards the underworld. So coming to meet is an interesting meditation for this week. Coming to meet is what we are actively doing. And what's interesting is even as far back as the I Ching, a lot of translations, this is kind of an ominous meeting, right? So we're coming to meet. But a translation of the I Ching reads, "Coming to meet, the maiden is powerful. One should not marry such a maiden." And, translations of the I Ching have been coming into existence throughout all of its long history. And so it's hard to say when certain translations come into form. Some, seem more patriarchal than others. Some are more focused on military than others. But when I look at kind of the natural or kind of Taoist tradition of this, I would say that coming to meet a powerful maiden is like the underworld is the maiden, in the sense that the underworld is yin, right? And in the yin-yang dichotomy, yang is growth-oriented. It's shooting upward. It's growing outward. And yin is grounding down. It's the roots. And so the maiden is powerful, and we're coming to meet the maiden this time of year. That's my personal interpretation. But you don't want to marry into only the darkness, right? We have to maintain our life within the winter months and have the spark that is keeping us moving forward, as we start to recognize the complexity and the depth of our past, that it's a beautiful place and we are not wedded to it, right? We can also make choice, like I said earlier. In the Gene Keys, the gift level of this Gate 44 is known as teamwork. And I really like that as a visual as well. It's like coming together means, you can meet meet your ancestors, you can meet the past, you can meet your past mistakes, you can meet your past wins, but you don't have to be married to them. You can create a new future if you see yourself as a part of the team and them as part of a team, and you're working together as a team, rather than having to say it's all you or it's all me. I'm all alone in this world, or I'm tied so deeply to my past that I can't escape it. So this is a gate where we're really navigating that fine line between and where we can act as a team. There's a human design and astrology project called the 64 Doors, which I really like. And they call gate 44. They have an archetype for each of the gates, to add even more words into the mix. But they call gate 44 the grid worker. And they say, with intuitive awareness of whether the past is worth repeating or not, the grid worker knows when history is about to repeat itself. Not only does she know where humanity is going if we keep repeating the same patterns and expect things to change for the better, she also senses where we are off course and how we can center back into balance and synarchy through true teamwork. Jose Johnson, a writer on the I Ching, writes, according to Confucius, when meeting contention in another, it would be wise to examine oneself. Temptation calls us to find external solutions to our internal problems. So change if you must, but make sure that you are not jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. The I Ching cautions against snap decisions based on emotions. And as the old saying goes, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. I think we live in a society that becomes obsessed with quick fixes or the next big thing, and we suffer from shiny object syndrome because we lack patience and perseverance. When things get tough, it's easier to look outside for a solution than to look inward for what we can change about ourselves. New techniques, strategies, or relationships are sexy. Hard work and consistency, not so much. So this is a good time, with all of that in mind, to examine the people in your life and ponder why you're connected to them. Look for higher purpose in all of your relationships, past, present, and future, and consider what the shared journey with others is teaching you. I think what lies beneath our outer appearance is what counts most. And it's a good idea to form ties with people who support and share your own type of intelligence and connect with like-minded souls. Coming together is something to just keep thinking about this. Like, why do we come together? Why don't we come together? It should be for the benefit of the team and not to blame or shame or get stuck. It's about forward momentum and continuation through the cycle. So last night I went to a party, and it was, sometimes I don't go out very much because bedtime is early for me. But when I do go out, I never know what to expect. In where I live, it feels like just so different every time, different feelings, different vibes, and don't have like a set group of people necessarily. But I was so inspired by the type of connections I was making and the type of conversations I was having at this party, and just going pretty deep, pretty fast, and recognizing a lot of similarities between how people were feeling on a deeper level. And it was definitely a Scorpio vibe party. Yeah, definitely hit on some underworld themes, but got to dance it off at the same time. So that's the best, right? I think that for anyone living, for all of us out there who are living, no matter how much we respect that life and death are both parts of the cycle of life, there's a certain instinctive fear in coming face to face with death. Always. There just is. And so the power dynamic between the dead and the living, between the past and the present, is a potent one. And it's filled with respect and reverence and paying honor. But it's also, in that is a desire to move forward with your life and keep improving upon what has been left to us, not repeating the mistakes of the past, for example. So coming to meet stresses cautious navigation through temptations, and focuses on restraint and principles actions amidst our challenges. So during this season of death, there's a union of forces, but we must practice mutual respect and understanding and work as a team with our pasts instead of battling with them or trying to reject them or merging with them completely. It's kind of parsing out what is new. The phoenix out of the ashes just really screams out to me as a image for this week. The human design expert, Christy Inge, who I reference often in this podcast, she calls Gate 44 the pattern interrupter, and it has the energy of practicing forgiveness and learning from mistakes, knowing that every moment holds the potential for healing and transformation. She writes, with this knowing, it can guide others to break painful patterns from the past. It uses those patterns as a way to learn, grow, and most importantly, forgive. On the negative end of the spectrum, Human Design Gate 44 is the energy of being afraid to repeat mistakes from the past and using those mistakes as a reason to not move forward. This internal resistance to the mistakes of the past actually prevents the ability to transform, learn, and grow. Mistakes really are just a part of life, and the past only has the meaning that we give it. And even more profoundly, there is actually no reason to revisit the past if it isn't for the purpose of moving forward. What really matters is now and how we are using the energy that is available to us. And in the cases where revisiting the past is helpful, as it is right now, this time of year, in a ritualized way, it must be done with compassion, forgiveness, and grace. So this Dia de Muertos, this Halloween, this Samhain, and this new moon in Scorpio, all happening around Thursday, Friday, it's a good time to manifest forgiveness. I love the story arc of the human design gates since we entered Scorpio season. This story of ending Libra season with distinct individual elements that are being weighted out on the scales. And as soon as Scorpio season begins, throwing them into the cauldron to be melted down into a cohesive stew. And then entering the game player gate where we face the fear of the melting pot and embrace the totality of existence and the immortality that arises from finding the continuum with our pasts and our futures. And then, this Gate 44, Gate of Alertness, reminding us that we can't get too comfortable in the boundarylessness of the depths, and that we must use our inner wisdom and our cellular memory and our embodied senses, the part of us that sustain even when our boundaries are disintegrating in the spooky scorpion's void. So this new moons are great times for manifesting when the sun and the moon are together in the same part of the sky. It's like a fertile soil to plant seeds in, because it's the dark night of the dark sky of the lunar cycle. So when you look up and don't see a huge full moon shining light on everything, and you see a lot more stars, think of those stars as the seeds that are being planted. It's an easy way to remember that new moons are for manifesting, because it's this dark time of introspection and being able to see more clearly in that way, to know what we want to plant, not as influenced by another body, a being of light. So this week, this new moon, I would say to drop the power plays and work as a team with our own pasts, and think about the tapestry of your past and your future, of your ancestors and your children, and use your senses to smell out the patterns between the two and see how they can work as a team. You can consider how you can stay alert through the upcoming weeks and months so that you don't fall into old subconscious patterns and repeat the mistakes of your past. This is also a perfect full moon or new moon for recognizing the power inside you, the power to reach into the void and receive messages from the other world so that you can manifest a different outcome for your future. So when it comes to this type of rewiring, like when you want to look at your subconscious, look at your ancestry, look at your roots, look at what's dying, look at what wants to come alive. I think that it is kind of, a rewiring of our minds, of our hearts, of our bodies. And it's this beautiful opportunity this time of year to do that. And I think that one major way to do that is finding the bravery first to come together with the roots of our fears, trace them to the past and say, oh, that's where that came from. Maybe it's deeper than me. Maybe it's deeper than my life. Maybe this goes back far further. And also the mistakes of our past, of our lived experience, things that we wish we would have done differently. And just sit with those things. Sit with our pasts in a big way this week, and take some time with yourself to do that. There's often so many celebrations and events this time of year, but it's, I think, a really important time to sit in solitude for a little bit and just be in reverence and in awareness about the past. And after, when we do that, there's definitely deep memory and history associated with the emotions that rise to the surface. And it's complex. Like I said in the beginning, it's not a simple time of growth. It is a complex time of decay and merging. And so, as these emotions show up, as anything that comes up from the depths during this time of year, we're able to reintegrate certain aspects of ourselves with memories of the past, and without just pushing them aside. It's an opportunity right now during this time to take space for that. And, once we come together with them and we acknowledge them, the fears, the dangers, the joyful memories, the nostalgia, everything, I'd say the next step is practicing forgiveness. And I loved how Christy Inge talks about forgiveness in this gate a lot, that it's really a lot about forgiveness. Staying alert is keeping our wits about us, but then not staying in that hypervigilant or alert state for too long, because that's not good for our systems, right? It's staying alert, making notice of things that we wish maybe could have been different, or wish were different in the past long ago or recent past. And then, forgiving. For me, the topic of forgiveness has come up a lot in the last week personally. I think with this season, along with this everything that's going on in the world, I've found a deep recognition that I'm still holding on to a lot of blame and shame and guilt for both myself and other people's past mistakes in, recent memory, in my childhood, in my ancestors' world. It's just all the way back. There's still a good amount of feelings of blame and shame and guilt especially, I'd say. And when I was talking about this, my partner asked if I had heard of the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono prayer, which is a simple, powerful Hawaiian mantra that is repeated, that says, "I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you." And I've heard of this many times throughout my life. And, I think I told him that I had heard of it, because I have, but I certainly have never practiced it, because I felt like maybe it wasn't my place, even though I've heard, just again and again that this specific prayer, saying these words, "I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you," can really help with forgiveness and reconciliation and healing, without going into too much of the details of like why or how, but just repeating it as a practice or a prayer. And, my partner reminded me that practice is prayer and prayer is practice. And something like this needs to be spoken and repeated and embodied, like the vibrations of that to get into your body, rather than just seeing it once and saying, "Oh yeah, sure, that sounds cool, I got that," as we can often do in our minds, right? So for the past few days, I've been practicing it, saying it aloud. I said, why not? And yeah, practicing practicing it toward myself and also toward other in my life, both people who are living and the dead. And so this new moon is a wonderful time to manifest dreams you have for your future, for this fertile soil of winter ahead, and to do so without forgetting your past and without blaming your past, without repeating patterns that no longer serve you. So I invite you as well to welcome a practice of forgiveness into your world this week, if it feels right for you, knowing that the rest of the manifestations and intentions could follow. But forgiveness it's really important to give that energy back, because there's so much that we hold on to in that hypervigilance. So the prayer again is, if you want to practice the Ho'oponopono prayer, it is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And, you can do it by taking a few deep breaths with your eyes closed and then slowly repeating that to yourself about 7 or 8 times. And it helps acknowledge and take responsibility for negative thoughts and actions and emotions and transform them into positive energy. There's that word again, transform. We are in the season of transformation. And I do believe that forgiveness is a big piece of real transformation, releasing charged energy in our bodies. And so use the energy of Scorpio season and the gate of alertness this week to find forgiveness for yourself and others and your past and somewhere in the continuum of your life story, so that you may work with them and be more ready to move into a new narrative. I think forgiveness is allowing people on your team. And if our ancestors, we can't take them off of our team per se. We can try, we can run away, we can hide, but when we practice forgiveness, it doesn't mean, giving in, or we still have to have our own boundaries within what feels right for us. But it doesn't have to be spoken to another person even. It's just forgiveness in your own heart, so that you can release that energy back to the world. So by working with a team with your past, this Samhain and Halloween season of ancestral reverence doesn't have to be overcome with fear or made light of and brushed aside. It's important work, this end of the harvest. We are laying the gardens to beds to rest for the next several months, and similarly, we may lay our regrets and fears about our pasts to rest too, allowing our selfhood to shine like a dewdrop on a spider web, interconnected with all the other dewdrops on the spider web in this interconnected tapestry of life. This week, I invite you to be gentle with yourself. This work is deep and powerful, and it can bring up a lot. So stay hydrated and well-rested and eat nourishing foods. Maybe tread lightly by taking on a few less social obligations and devoting a little more time to yourself and your family and your roots. So happy Samhain, Halloween, Dia de Muertos, or however you choose to celebrate this time of year. Thank you for listening and being here on Cycles of Time, as always, and sending out blessings to your beautiful, complex pasts and your beautiful, complex futures. I wish you the best this week. Take it easy. Share this podcast if it felt resonant to you or brought you any value. I appreciate any 5-star reviews on the podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps get this out into the world. And I'm loving, your DMs and comments, so keep them coming. And I'll see you again next week for an election week ahead. So yeah, take some good rest, some good breaths this week. And I'll see you soon. Bye.